Hello, I'm Dana Cowley, and welcome to Charter Local Edition Northwest. Today we're in Salem, Oregon, and we're covering the state's legislative issues. My guest today is Representative Dennis Richardson from Central Point. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
What efforts are you making toward the budget this year?
Well, in 2011, I was co-chair of Ways and Means, and so I was involved in all of the planning of the budget since the last election, and we went into the minority. I've now been kind of excluded, and so the Democrats are in charge of the House and the Senate and the governor's office, and so anyway, the co-chairs have created their own budget, and then I've been helpful in having an alternative budget that basically is a counterpoint to what was proposed by the Democrats.
And what is it that differs from yours from the Democratic Party?
Well, it's a huge difference. The forecast revenue was $1.5 billion of additional revenue in the next 2 years, and our budget says when you have that kind of an increase, you can live within your means and start saving some for the times when you won't have such an increase. The Democrat co-chair's budget took a different tack. They said, well, that's 1.5, but it's not enough. We need to cut programs for $200 million. We need a $275 million tax increase, and we need to get about $800 or $900 million of PERS reforms. All of those things to balance the budget. And then, of course, if you do that, then you say, what happens 2 years from now when you start? That's your starting point, and you only go up from there. It's unsustainable, and it's not an appropriate way to budget.
And you mentioned PERS. PERS is an issue in the state of Oregon. It's your retirement program for your state employees, and apparently there's some concern with cost of living increases with that budget.
Yes, part of the budget that was proposed by the co-chairs included cost of living adjustments in the future, and also it also depleted or held back payments to out-of-state workers who've retired and moved away, because there's about a 10% bonus that was given to make, to compensate for Oregon taxes, because at first they weren't taxed and then they were going to be taxed. So if you're moving and you live outside of Oregon and you're not paying Oregon tax, then you shouldn't get that bonus. That's not a problem. But the real problem they had was that they said, well, there's $350 million, we'll just delay that. We'll just do like a Christmas bonus on your credit card where you don't have to make any payments now, but you're going to have to pay it later. And so it's $350 million that will not be paid in the next 2 years, but will become a debt payable for the 20 years after that. It'll end up costing over $1 billion of additional costs to have the benefit of $350 million in the next 2 years. It's not sound budgeting principles.
And then you also mentioned the request for a tax increase, which is very often not popular with voters.
It's fascinating because last week, before we had the newest quarterly revenue forecast, the discussion was we need $275 million, we've got to have it and to balance our budget, and that'll require a tax increase. The forecast came out, and happy days are here again. The forecast says there's going to be an additional $272 million of expected revenue in the next 2 years that wasn't anticipated before that forecast.
It's almost a push.
And so we said, done, we're okay, we don't need a tax increase, we can wrap up this session and go home. But they said, oh, well, no, we really need to raise taxes by $200 million more. And we're saying, why? Because you have the power to do that? I mean, what is the justification? And they said, because we think that it's appropriate and we're in charge.
Interesting. Dennis, thank you. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us on the show. This is Representative Dennis Richardson. I'm Dana Cowley, and you're watching Charter Local Edition Northwest.